Welcome to the Perfect Place to Put a Practice podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping private practice owners just like you find the ideal spot to launch and grow their new business/practice. I'm your host, Mike Green from Dr. Demographics, and boy, today we have a doozy, our most controversial episode that we do every single year. The one I get emails from doctors, the ones that always cause lots of problems. I used to try to talk Scott out of doing this episode back in the day, and he always dug his heels in. He said, you know what? No, we are going to let our doctors know what the kiss of death locations are going to be for the next year. And so that's what today's episode is, kiss of death locations for 2026. You know, if you're thinking about opening a practice next year, location is everything. We've talked about hotspots in lots of different episodes, and we'll continue to do that. As a matter of fact, next week we will talk about the best places, the top list, the beautiful areas to open up a practice. But today we're talking about the kiss of death. We're going to highlight 8 markets, ranging from small towns to major cities, that potentially could have the kiss of death for new practice owners. Now, these places are plagued by population loss, non-business friendly governments, economic stagnation, high competition, or other factors that will just make it really challenging to build momentum. We'll count them down from number 8 to number 1 with data-backed reasons why they're toxic. Our goal, we just want to help you avoid that challenging area, that challenging time, especially if you're sitting back from the map deciding where you're going to go. So sit tight, get your pencil sharpened, and let's go through the 2026 Kiss of Death locations. Now, before we get started, before I dive into the list, every year when we do this episode, I always have to make the same disclaimer. Just because your town or area is on this list does not mean that you can't be successful. As a matter of fact, over the years, we've placed doctors in amazing demographic areas, and they failed because they don't take care of external things like taking care of their reputation, or they didn't get involved with the community, or a variety of other things. On the other side of the coin, we have doctors that go into absolutely terrible areas that we have told them they're terrible demographically. And you know what? They've done amazing things. Why? Because they're amazing people, and they're committed to marketing. They're committed to reputation management. So in short, demographics is not the only factor you should be considering when finding a place to practice. There's other indicators for success that will likely play a major role into whether you ultimately find success or not. So if your area is on this list, don't get too depressed, but we probably ought to have a marketing conversation. If this is your hometown and you're going to be mad at me for sharing it on this list, well, we're going to give you the data, and then you can take it whichever way you want. But for us in 2026, these are areas that are struggling. Some of them won't be a surprise to you. Some of them may be, but it's areas that we definitely would say kiss of death for 2026. All right. Let's first kind of define, why an area would have a kiss of death label. So it really boils down to sustainability. Great practice needs growing patient base, affordable operations, supportive policies, all those things. So when a market has shrinking populations, like we've seen in many Rust Belt cities, demand for services dries up. And in areas that have anti-business governments with super high taxes, strict regulations, over-strict, we like regulations, but over-strict unnecessary regulations, or poor infrastructure, you're going to end up fighting an uphill battle. So According to the U.S. Census Bureau 2024 data, over 50% of the United States counties experienced a population decline in the last year. That's a trend that is accelerating into 2026, according to many economists. Now, we're a little bit more optimistic than that, but it's probably right that about half the counties in the United States have seen some population loss. The good news is the other half have seen some really strong growth, and so we'll talk about those in upcoming episodes. So you pair that with reports from the Tax Foundation that shows states like Illinois and New York with some of the worst business climates, and you've just got red flags everywhere. So for private practices where patient retention and cash flow is king, these factors can lead to a closure rate sometimes as high as 40%, which is crazy, in the first 2 years, according to the SBA. So let's break down some of the worst offenders, starting with number 8. And number 8 is Youngstown, Ohio. Small market, right in the heart of the Rust Belt. Youngstown's lost about 10% of its population since 2010, dropping to around 60,000 residents by 2025 projections. This decline is driven by manufacturing job loss, youth outmigration, leaving an aging, low-income demographic that struggles with healthcare affordability. The local government, frankly, is not helping. They have high property taxes in that area, slow permit processes from all accounts that we can see, and so that will make your setup costs quite prohibitive when you set up a new practice. So for a new dentist or veterinarians, you'd face low demand for elective services, and competition for established practices clinging to survival sometimes. The data from the Ohio Department of Health show that there's a surplus of providers in the area. Now, that's a general terms. Obviously, we'd want to look at the specific specialties, but in general, there's a surplus in the area. And so that makes demand really, really hard, and competition really, really hard. And so what happens in those areas is what we call a race to the bottom. And what that means is that if you're a dentist, for example, and you have a lot of competing dentists and not enough population to go after in those markets, you start getting into a price war, and it's just a race to the bottom as far as pricing goes. And now all of a sudden your margins are thin and your high failure rate is high. So we'd love to see things. I love Ohio. Ohio is a beautiful place. I've lived there for several years. Great place to be. We would love to see that area do a turn in the next couple of years. There's some things happening in Ohio, some investments that are happening in Ohio, specifically more close to Cincinnati and Dayton. But for Youngstown, we would love to see a U-turn in the direction that they're going. We hope it is. We love Youngstown. All right, number 7 is Flint, Michigan. Now, Flint's been in the news a lot, so it's probably not going to surprise you that Flint is on the list. Another small to mid-sized market, really reeling from economic woes. Flint's population plummeted 20% in the last decade to under 80,000, thanks to the water crisis that we all read about in the news and just general industrial decline. Unemployment hovers at about 8%, double the national average per the 2025 Bureau of Labor Statistics forecast. The state government offers some incentives, which is good, but local regulations are quite burdensome, with zoning laws and delays for openings by months if you're building a new building. For optometrists and veterinarians, the low median income around $30,000 means patients often skip that preventative care. And so those type of practices can often suffer in those. So a 2024 study by the Michigan Health Council highlights that oversaturation in basic services make it hard for newcomers to gain traction without deep discounts that erode profits. So our opinion is, unless you're from that area, you have a lot of family connections, you have a rich uncle, something in that area that's going to help you get through some of these other challenges, Flint, Michigan is probably an area that you ought to look elsewhere. We just like Ohio, I love Michigan, beautiful state. Flint has just had a string of bad luck in some things that were outside of their control. We're rooting for Flint. We hope that they're not on the list next year, but for this year, they're on the kiss of death list for 2026. All right. Number 6. Let's talk about Buffalo, New York. Now, this one's interesting. When we wrote this list about a week ago, Buffalo was on firmly on this list, right in the middle. However, there's been some really cool announcements that we need to feel a little bit more confident are going to actually come into play for Buffalo that might have taken them off the list. And so we're going to say number 6 is Buffalo, New York, with a little bit of an asterisk, because they may have some good news coming their way. We hope so. But for this mid-sized city, harsh winters, harsher economic conditions, unfortunately, Buffalo's population dipped another 1.5% in 2024. And that's a 20-year trend down to about 275,000. New York has a high state tax. That's no surprise. They're near the bottom of the Tax Foundation's 2025 Business Climate Index. Local fees, squeeze on small business, just some things that are, in our opinion, are unnecessary. Non-business friendly policies like strict labor laws, high energy costs add to the pain. For practices, it's an aging population, so there's about 18% of the people are over 65. And so if you're focused on that market, that's a great thing. If not, that can be a little bit more of a challenge. So, specialized care is great. General care, not so much. Out-migration's happening a lot with young families, although that's the thing that we think it might change here in the very short future. So much so that it may be on our next episode, Places of Promise. We may actually put Buffalo on there. That's how quickly things can change. So for now, we're going to keep them at number 6, Buffalo, New York, as a kiss of death location for 2026. All right. Number 5, St. Louis, Missouri, right in the middle of the country. Mid-sized market facing some urban decay. Unfortunately, St. Louis has lost about 5% of its population since 2020. Now it's sitting at about 290,000. Crime rates are high, and with that comes some people just migrating out of the area, and that's what's causing, in our opinion, that population loss. Local government's fragmented structure, multiple overlapping jurisdictions make things complicated. Regulatory nightmare in many cases from many reports that we've read. Licensing delays and high sales taxes, and really just some economic stagnation in that area. There's been a really flat GDP. Growth projected in the 2026 per the Federal Reserve data means that patients are cutting back from the non-essential visits. Veterinarians may struggle, with pet owners prioritizing basics over wellness exams. And so, again, that preventative thing then becomes a challenge. So, again, St. Louis is a great, awesome city, but they need to make some changes, in our opinion, to really make it an attractive prospect for new practice owners to open up a new practice in the area. All right, coming in at number 4 is Baltimore, Maryland. Man, Baltimore's been on our list several times. Mid-sized to large urban area, and it's just kind of been in decline. Baltimore's population shrank about 2% in 2024 to about 570,000. Baltimore obviously is known high crime, many poor schools pushing families out of the area. Maryland's government is moderately business friendly, I would say more so than some of these other areas that we've talked about, but their local policies in Baltimore include high property taxes, low infrastructure improvements. For optometrists specifically, low insurance coverage rates, 15% uninsured per kff.org, limit reimbursements a lot of times to some of those practices. In 2025, the Urban Institute report notes healthcare is non-existent in parts of the city, but really oversaturated downtown. with all the health providers in the area, so it can cause some pretty serious competition. So Baltimore's an area that that you need to really be smart about where you're placing your practice. You've got to know the neighborhoods around you. You've got to know who are going to be the most likely patients coming to your practice. It's not an area where you're just going to pick an empty building and throw a practice in there. Definitely need to pull a site viability report if you're looking at Baltimore in the Maryland area. All right, number 3. Let's go all the way across to the other side of the country. Portland, I hate having them on this list. I love Portland. Such a beautiful city, such a rich history. It's kind of quirky, and I love that. I love that about Portland. But man, they have had challenges, in our opinion, the last, I would say 7 or 8 years. They saw a 1% population drop in 2024, so now they're about 630,000. They've got just a lot of really progressive policies that have just gotten out of control, in our opinion. They have homeless problems, and with that causes a business exodus. We've talked to a lot of doctors who are looking to get out of Portland because they just don't feel like the city government has their back. And they would rather have the backs of some of these progressive policies and causes over the businesses. And quite frankly, that's hard. That's hard to do business when you don't feel like that you have the local government with you. The local government has a huge focus on social programs, certainly over economic incentives, so it leaves very little support for the small private practices in the area. Veterinarians and dentists, the high cost of living drives up the staff wages, while the patient out-migration reduces loyalty. It's just a challenge. Those two things really make it challenging, where it's very expensive to have staff in the area because the cost of living is so high, but also you're fighting tooth and nail to get every patient, every client through the door. Just makes it really, really challenging. So again, I hate having Portland on here because it's such a beautiful city, has so much going for it, but I would love to see the city government go a different direction. And I'm all for social programs. I'm all for helping the homeless, all of those things. But the way they've gone about it, I think, has not been business friendly. And because of that, our phone rings off the hook with doctors looking to go elsewhere. So, all right, let's move on to number 2. So number 2 is an area, it's been on the list. Matter of fact, I think number 2 and number 1 have been on this list for years and years. They're both big enough areas that you certainly could go here and find success, but you will have challenges. There's just no question about it. So number 2 is Chicago. It's a large market drowning in debt. I mean, that's the best way to put it. Chicago's population fell by about 0.8% in 2024 to about 2.6 million. This is a trend fueled with high crime and taxes. And again, just something that Chicago has had challenges with for enough years now that I think that it's becoming part of the storyline of Chicago, and that's a real shame because Chicago's a beautiful city, so much to offer. Illinois has one of the worst business climates, in our opinion, per the tax foundation as well. With sky-high property taxes, pension burdens trickling down to the locals, non-business friendly policies like complex licensing and union mandates make hiring tough. For practices, the saturated market with over 5,000 dentists alone means that there's a lot of competition. And a lot of that competition has been there for a long time. We find generally that doctors that are from the area or are expanding to additional locations in the area have easier success than those that are just starting de novo, don't have any connections to the area. Maybe they're a Bears fan, I'm not sure, but they decide to go to Chicago and open a practice without any external connections, and they do struggle. Not that it's not that they can find success, because they certainly can. There's lots of people, there's lots of money, there's lots of culture there in Chicago, but you really have to be on your marketing game to find them. We'd love to see Chicago turn around. Obviously, the Federal Reserve predicts sluggish growth for 2026, and Chicago is going to be definitely one of those that will lead in that sluggish growth. So again, love to see Chicago not be on this list at some point. All right, now the number one kiss of death location for 2026 is San Francisco, California. Oh, San Francisco, why do you do this? Large, iconic, man, beautiful city. I love visiting San Francisco. Such a history rich and just picturesque. It's just so beautiful. Spent a bunch of time there with my son a few years ago, and just love San Francisco. But man, they've lost 7% of its population since 2020. Down to about 800,000 due to the ridiculously high sky high housing costs. And not only the high housing costs, but remote work, that option that came after COVID, in my opinion, really hurt San Francisco, because so many of those workers worked for pretty progressive companies that immediately said everybody can go home and work from home, and a lot of those people moved out of the city, and they went and found something that was more affordable, and I think that really hurt a lot of things in San Francisco, and that is continuing in a direction that is not great. And so we would love to see San Francisco build back those awesome companies again, be really attractive to those tech companies. After all, San Francisco is definitely known as a high tech area, but they can't favor those high tech companies over the small businesses. They've got to offer some incentives for them, for the provider startups as well. Optometrists and vets, the median income disparity creates a challenging market. Affluent patients, seek premium care elsewhere when others can't afford it. So again, challenging area. The closures in that area, unfortunately, are about 25%, according to the California Healthcare Foundation report in 2025. And that just cannot continue. San Francisco, we all love you. Please come back. Be just a better place, not just to visit, but also to open a business. We would love to recommend doctors to move to San Francisco, not just for the lifestyle, but for the awesome people and rich history is part of that city. Whew, that's a hard list to get through. I love these areas. I feel like I'm beating them down, and I'm not. I'm rooting for all of these areas, but I'm more rooting for you as the doctor. I want to make sure the location you're placing your practice is thriving. I want to make sure that you thrive when we help you decide where you want to open that practice. I do not want you to open an area that you're going to have the deck stacked against you. I want you to open a practice in an area and play a game that you know that you can win. And there are so many of those areas throughout the country. And I hope that these 8 that I've mentioned here today do a turnaround, and they as well become part of areas of promise that we can confidently recommend at Dr. Demographics for you to open a practice. All right. Well, that will do it for today. Thank you so much to all of you who have spent these last 20 or so minutes visiting with me in these Kiss of Death locations. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for all the kind words that we receive on a weekly basis. If we can help you find that perfect place to put a practice, we would love to be part of that journey. Visit us at drdemographics.com or give us a call at 844-704-0499. If you'd like to reach out to me directly, you can do so by emailing me at mike@drdemographics.com. And with that, we'll see you on the next episode.